Some stories do not begin with love. They begin with a woman counting coins under a table, or a man pretending he is not hungry, because hunger is easier to admit than loneliness. Out in the Arizona Territory, in 1888, a person could ride 50 miles from a wound and still find it waiting at the next doorway. But sometimes mercy came dressed as a question so plain, nobody knew it was a prayer. Eleanor Langley ran through the back door of the Blue Lantern boarding house with her white wedding skirt gathered in both fists, the hem brown with mud from the alley behind Cedar Flats. A pearl comb hung crooked in her loosened hair, flashing once in the stove light like a small broken moon. Her breath came sharp and thin, and the satin bodice of her dress was torn at one sleeve, where she had pulled free from a man who thought a promise made before witnesses could be used like a rope. At the kitchen table sat Wade Hawthorne, the town blacksmith, broad-shouldered and still as a fence post, his hat beside an untouched tin plate. Soot marked the lines of his hands. His coffee had gone cold. He looked up but did not speak. Eleanor stopped hard enough that her shoes scraped the boards. The kitchen smelled of beans, stove smoke, dishwater, and fear. Behind her, from the front room, came the muffled rise of men's voices. Her groom's voice was one of them. Wade saw the veil in her hand, saw the bruise beginning along her wrist, saw the way she held herself like a person expecting the door to burst open. Eleanor saw only his empty plate. The question left her before shame could stop it. "Have you eaten?" Wade blinked once. "No, Mom." She crossed the kitchen as if she had been born there, lifted the pot from the stove, and spooned beans onto his plate with trembling hands. One tear fell onto the table, darkening the wood between them. "Before we go further, tell us where you are watching from. Leave your country or town in the comments. And if this story touches something tender in you, please like, share, and subscribe. Now come back with me to that kitchen, where one question changed two lonely lives. Wade did not reach for the fork. He watched Eleanor set bread beside the beans, watched her wipe her cheek with the heel of her hand, watched her stand with the serving spoon clutched like a weapon. The kitchen door behind her opened an inch. Eleanor turned so fast the spoon struck the table edge. A girl of about 12 slipped in. She wore an apron too large for her and had flour on one cheek. "Miss Langley," she whispered, then glanced at the wedding dress. "They're looking for you." "I know, Ruth. Miss S. Bell says you can hide in the pantry, but Mr. Delacourt says he'll search the whole house if he has to." At the name, Eleanor's face lost what little color it had. Wade put one hand over the fork. "Muse Delacourt, my intended husband," Eleanor said, and the words sounded as if they had splinters in them. "Were you wed?" "No." The answer was small, but it did not shake. The voices from the front rose louder. A chair scraped. Mrs. Bell, who owned the boarding house, said something sharp and motherly. A man answered in a smooth tone that had learned how to sound respectable while demanding ugly things. Wade stood. He was not a tall, talking man. In Cedar Flats, people said Wade Hawthorne could shoe 6 horses before breakfast and go a week without spending 10 words. He had once been a cowboy on the Bar M Range before a winter accident burned his right forearm and left him with a limp when the weather turned cold. After that, he had built his blacksmith shop beside the livery and let iron speak for him. Now the chair legs gave a low scrape as he pushed back from the table. Eleanor held out one hand. "Please don't fight him. I don't want blood in Mrs. Bell's kitchen." Wade looked at her wrist. "Did he do that?" Eleanor folded her hand against her skirt. He pulled away. "That ain't an answer. It's the only one I can afford." Wade's jaw tightened. The inner door opened fully, and Mrs. Bell stepped into the kitchen, round and fierce, her gray hair pinned with 2 black combs. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, "I'm sorry to trouble you at supper, but we have a difficulty." Behind her came Silas Delacourt. He was handsome in the expensive way that made poor men step aside and shopkeepers smile too quickly. His gray suit looked untouched by dust. His boots shone. A watch chain glimmered across his vest. But his eyes, when they found Eleanor, were not handsome. They were angry with the cold patience of a man whose property had wandered. "There you are," Silas said. "You've embarrassed yourself enough." Eleanor lifted her chin, though her fingers twisted the spoon handle. "I will return your ring. You will return to the church." "No." The word dropped into the kitchen like an iron nail. Silas smiled without warmth. "You are upset?" "Women often are on wedding days." Wade moved one step, putting himself between the table and Eleanor without making a show of it. Silas looked him over. "This is family business. No family of mine in this room," Wade said. Mrs. Bell folded her arms. "Nor mine, praise the Lord." Silas ignored her, his gaze fixed on Eleanor. "Your father's debt does not vanish because you lost your nerve. You signed the agreement. I paid the creditors. I paid for the dress on your back. I paid for the room you slept in last night. I paid for your respectable future." Eleanor's mouth trembled once. "You paid men to stop calling at my father's grave. I rescued your name. You bought it." The kitchen went quiet. Ruth gasped softly. Silas took one step toward Eleanor. Wade took one step too. It was not dramatic. No chair flew, no pistol appeared. But the whole room changed around him, as if the stove fire had drawn itself up. Silas stopped. "You would interfere with a lawful arrangement?" he asked. Wade's face did not move. "I would interfere with a man cornering a woman in a kitchen. She owes me money." "Then take it to Judge Hollis. She is wearing my property." Eleanor looked down at the wedding dress, the stained satin, the seed pearls stitched at the bodice, the pretty lace cuffs that had felt like handcuffs since morning. Her cheeks flamed. Wade reached for his hat. "Mrs. Bell, you got a blanket?" Mrs. Bell understood before anyone else did. She crossed to the peg by the stove and snatched down a brown wool shawl. Wade held it out without touching Eleanor. "Cover up if you want." For a second she stared at the shawl, as if no one had ever offered her a choice over something so small. Then she took it and wrapped it around her shoulders. Silas laughed once. "This is absurd." "Most cruelty is," Mrs. Bell snapped. Silas' smile thinned. "Eleanor, come here." She did not move. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. "Then listen carefully. By tomorrow I will have a warrant for breach of contract, theft of goods, and fraud. Your late father's house in Prescott is already gone. You have no family here, no money, no reputation. The only protection you have is the one you are refusing." Wade glanced at Eleanor. "No family here, no money, no reputation." Those words had weight in Cedar Flats. A woman could be ruined by less than running from a church in a wedding dress. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the shawl, but she looked at Silas, not at the floor. "Then I will be poor with my own name." For the first time, Silas' polished face cracked. "You ungrateful little fool." Wade's voice came low. "You're done speaking to her." Silas turned his anger on him. "And what are you to her?" Wade said nothing. That silence made a dangerous gap. Mrs. Bell looked from Wade to Eleanor. Ruth rose near the flour barrel. Silas' mouth curved. "Ah, I see. You ran from the altar to the blacksmith's supper table. That will make a fine story by morning." Eleanor's face went white. Wade picked up the untouched plate of beans, carried it to the stove, and set it back on the warming shelf. It was such an ordinary act that everyone watched it. Then he turned. "She asked if I had eaten," he said. "That is more decency than I have had from most folks this week. Say one more filthy thing about her, and I'll carry you outside by that shiny collar." Silas' hand twitched near his coat, but he was not a man who dirtied himself when law and gossip could do the beating for him. He backed toward the door. "This town will know what she is before breakfast." "They might," Wade said. "They'll know what you are by supper." Silas left through the dining room, his boots sharp on the boards. Only when the front door slammed did Eleanor sway. Wade reached out, then stopped with his hand in the air, giving her the dignity to catch herself. She gripped the table instead. Mrs. Bell took the spoon from her. "Child, sit down before your knees. Forget the rest of you." "I should go." "Where?" Mrs. Bell asked. Eleanor did not answer. Outside, the evening wind dragged dust along the alley and rattled the loose pan above the sink. From the dining room came the hush of boarders pretending not to listen. The church bell, unused now, hung silent across the street. Wade picked up his plate again and sat. Eleanor looked at him, confused. He took the fork and ate a mouthful of beans. Mrs. Bell stared. "Wade Hawthorne, is this your way of helping?" He swallowed. She asked if I had eaten. Something in Eleanor's face broke, but gently this time, like ice. Giving under spring sun, she sank into the chair across from him. Ruth brought another plate without being asked. Mrs. Bell cut bread. Eleanor sat in her wedding dress and brown shawl, while the quiet blacksmith cowboy ate what she had served him, slow and steady, as if his staying at that table could nail the whole room to the earth. Cedar Flats woke ugly the next morning. By sunup, 3 versions of Eleanor Langley's shame had crossed the street before she had crossed the room. In one, she had stolen from Silas Delacour and fled with jewels in her bodice. In another, she had been found in the blacksmith's arms. In the third, whispered by a washerwoman who claimed to know a cousin in Prescott, Eleanor's father had gambled away everything and sold her before he died. The truth was quieter and harder to carry. Eleanor had come to Arizona from St. Louis as a girl of 13, after her mother died of lung fever, and her father took a clerkship with a freight office in Prescott. He had been kind, impractical, and too proud to admit when figures slipped from his keeping. When he died, he left a trunk of press shirts, a Bible with her mother's name inside, and debts folded so neatly in a tin box that Eleanor had wept at the orderliness of ruin. Silas Delacour had offered rescue. He owned a share in a mining supply house, kept rooms in Prescott and Cedar Flats, and spoke to Eleanor as though sorrow had made her delicate and valuable. He paid 3 creditors. He brought oranges when she was ill. He sat beside her father's grave and said no decent woman should have to stand alone in the world. By the time Eleanor understood that his kindness had a ledger, the town had already begun calling her fortunate. Now she sat on the edge of Mrs. Bell's narrow guest bed, still wearing the borrowed shawl, while the wedding dress lay across a chair like a shed skin. Her own clothes were packed in a small carpet bag, 1 gray traveling dress, 2 chemises, 1 nightgown, a needle case, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and a paper packet of dried lavender that no longer held much scent. Mrs. Bell knocked once and came in carrying coffee. "He's in the kitchen," she said. Eleanor looked up. "Silas? No, Wade Hawthorne. Oh, he paid for his breakfast and asked if there was wood needed split. He should stay." Mrs. Bell handed her the cup. "That man has not stayed anywhere he was not needed since his sister died." Eleanor warmed her hands around the coffee. "His sister?" Mrs. Bell's mouth softened. "Emma Hawthorne. Sweet girl. Married a horse trader who took her east and sent her letters full of fine promises. She came home 2 years later with a baby under her shawl and fever in her bones. Wade brought her here to me, paid for the doctor, sat up nights, forged iron by day. She died at that table downstairs." Eleanor looked at the floor. "The baby, with kin in Tucson. Wade sends money when he can. Never speaks of it. Outside, an axe struck wood in the yard, 1 clean blow after another." Eleanor rose and went to the window. Wade stood by the chopping block, behind the boarding house, sleeves rolled, black hair damp at the temples. He moved with steady force, though his right leg dragged slightly when he shifted. Each split piece he stacked against the wall, neat as a promise. "He doesn't owe me anything," she said. "No," Mrs. Bell replied. "That might be why it matters." Eleanor sipped coffee, bitter and strong. "I need work. You need rest. I can rest when I have paid you." Mrs. Bell snorted. You can pay me by not fainting in my kitchen. I mean it. So do I. But if you are set on work, I'll take help with rooms and washing. Only I cannot keep you long if Delacour starts trouble. My boarders have wives. Wives have tongues. Tongues have husbands who owe money. I understand. Mrs. Bell looked at her carefully. Do you? Eleanor set the cup down. Her hands had stopped trembling. I understand that a woman without money is a problem everyone wants moved along. I understand that Mr. Delacour will use whatever shame he can find. And I understand that I still have two hands. She went downstairs in the gray dress, hair braided simply, sleeves buttoned at the wrist to hide the bruise. The kitchen looked different in morning light. Last night's fear had retreated into corners, but the table remembered. Wade was there, not sitting this time, but fixing the loose hinge on the pantry door, while Ruth dried cups by the sink. He glanced up. Ma'am, Mr. Hawthorne. Mrs. Bell watched them from the stove with open interest. Eleanor tied on an apron. Ruth, where is the flour kept? In the barrel. I saw Weevil. In the biscuit tin. Mrs. Bell made a wounded sound. You did not? I did. Lord preserve us. For the first time since the church, Eleanor almost smiled. She sifted flour through muslin, picked out spoiled bits, wiped the table, and set coffee to boil again, because every man in the territory seemed to believe coffee could fix what prayer had not reached yet. Wade worked on the hinge without asking questions. When the pantry door swung clean and true, he gathered his tools. Mrs. Bell said, Sit, eat while it's hot. I've work. Eleanor turned from the stove. The words came softer this time. Have you eaten? Wade stilled. Ruth hid a smile behind a dish towel. Mrs. Bell put both hands on her hips. Answer the woman. Wade looked uncomfortable, as though kindness were a shirt that did not fit him. Not yet? Then sit, Eleanor said. He did. She served biscuits, beans fried with onions and coffee, dark enough to float a horseshoe. Wade ate without praise, but he ate everything. When he finished, he placed 2 coins by his cup. Eleanor picked them up and put one back in front of him. That was not a 2-coin breakfast. It was to me. It was not on the board. Board's wrong. She met his eyes then. They were not black, as she had thought in the dim kitchen, but brown with amber at the center, like bottle glass held to firelight. Quiet eyes. Tired eyes. She pushed the 2nd coin back again. I will not begin my freedom by taking what I did not earn. Wade looked at the coin, then at her. After a moment, he took it. Mrs. Bell, pretending to scrub the stove, smiled into the iron. By noon, the first woman came. Mrs. Pritchard from the Mercantile arrived for a loaf of bread and left with nothing because she spent all her time inspecting Eleanor's face for signs of sin. Mrs. Bell said the bread was not for sale to owls. By 2 miners came for dinner and asked too loudly whether the runaway bride was included with the meal. Wade, who had returned to mend a stove grate, set his hammer on the table. They paid without eating dessert. By evening, Silas sent a note. It came folded in cream paper, delivered by a boy who would not meet Eleanor's eyes. Mrs. Bell said, Burn it. Eleanor opened it. My dear Eleanor, I will permit this hysteria to pass if you return by sundown and apologize privately. You have been misled by coarse people who cannot comprehend the nature of obligation. Your debts remain. The dress remains unpaid. Your father's name remains in my hands. Do not force me to protect myself publicly. S.D. Eleanor read it twice. Then she folded it and tucked it into her Bible. Wade stood at the back door with a repair stove grate in one hand. You going? No. You got somewhere else? No. Money. $7.18. That won't carry you far. I know. He nodded once, not pitying her, only counting facts as a blacksmith counts heat. Mrs. Bell said, Wade, don't stand there like a thundercloud. Say what you came to say. He shifted his weight, uneasy. My shop has a room behind it. Was my sister's when she came back sick. It has a cot, a washstand, and a bolt on the inside. I sleep in the loft above the forge. You could take the room until you find better." Eleanor stared at him. Mrs. Bell stopped stirring gravy. Ruth's mouth fell open. "That would ruin me," Eleanor said. "Delacourt is trying already. It would ruin you too. Not much left to spoil." "That is not true." His expression closed a little. "It is a room. Nothing more. Mrs. Bell can walk you over, inspect it. Tell every hen in town there's a bolt. I'll put up a curtain. You cook your own meals. I stay out, unless invited. Door to the shop stays between us." Eleanor pressed a hand to the table. "Why?" Wade looked toward the yard, where evening dust moved like smoke. "Because my sister once stood in a room full of people who thought shame was proof. Nobody asked if she had eaten." The kitchen went silent. Eleanor looked down at her hands, the same hands that had spoon beans for him, while her world split open. She understood then that he was not rescuing her. He was answering something old. "I will pay rent," she said. "Can you?" "Not yet." "Then cook breakfast for me and keep the room clean." Mrs. Bell cleared her throat. "And you will both keep the arrangement decent enough that even Mrs. Pritchard chokes, trying to make scandal out of it." Eleanor looked at Wade. "No locked door between the shop and the street?" "Street door locks from inside. Back room has its own bolt. I'll give you the key to the yard gate. And if Mr. Delacourt comes, he can talk to me." "No," she said. "He can talk to the sheriff. I will not hide behind you like stolen goods." Something like respect moved across Wade's face. "All right." The blacksmith shop sat at the edge of Cedar Flats, where the main street gave up trying to be respectable and became wagon ruts, mesquite, and open sky. A sign with Hawthorne Ironworks hung above the wide doors. The paint faded, but the letters square. Inside, the forge crouched dark and red-eyed. Horseshoes hung from pegs. Tongs, hammers, files, and iron bars lined the wall in stern order. The place smelled of coal smoke, leather, hot metal, and the faint sweetness of hay drifting from the livery next door. The back room was smaller than Eleanor expected, and cleaner than she feared. A narrow cot stood against one wall. A braided rug lay beside it, worn thin in the center. On the washstand sat a chipped blue pitcher. The single window looked out on a yard with a woodpile, a rain barrel, and one stubborn patch of dirt where someone had once tried to grow marigolds. Above the cot, on a nail, hung a child's red ribbon. Wade saw Eleanor notice it. "I can take that down." "No," she said. "Leave it." He looked as if she had touched a bruise without meaning to. Mrs. Bell inspected the bolt, the window latch, the distance between cot and door, the curtain Wade nailed across the passage, and the stovepipe. She announced it proper enough for a preacher and drafty enough for a sinner. That first night, Eleanor lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the shop settling around her. The loft boards creaked once when Wade climbed up. A horse stamped at the livery. Somewhere down the street, drunk men sang badly. The forge gave off a cooling tick like an old clock. She kept her carpetbag under the cot and her mother's Bible on the washstand. The wedding dress was gone, returned to Silas by Mrs. Bell, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. The ring sat in the sheriff's office as disputed property. Eleanor had watched Sheriff Amos Pike write a receipt for it, while Silas stood by, smiling as if all law belonged to him. "You will regret making this public," Silas had told her. Eleanor had answered, "I have regretted silence more." Now, in the dark, bravery thinned. She thought of Prescott, of her father's trembling hands signing papers he did not understand, of Silas' patient voice. She thought of the church that morning, the flowers, the women smiling, the minister opening his book. She had stood beside Silas and seen the future stretch before her like a locked room, his house, his rules, his careful punishments disguised as guidance. Then he had taken her wrist too hard when she hesitated. "Smile, Eleanor, you owe me that much." That was when she ran. In the loft above, Wade turned once on his bedroll. Eleanor whispered into the dark, "Oh no, man, my breath." The forge ticked in answer. Morning came copper-colored and dry. Eleanor rose before Wade and found the tiny cook stove in the corner of the shop, black with disuse but sound. She cleaned the ash, laid kindling, and burned her tongue lighting it. She opened the yard door to let smoke out, pumped water from the barrel, and mixed cornmeal with salt and lard from the tin Mrs. Bell had sent. By the time Wade climbed out from the loft, hair damp from the basin, shirt sleeves rolled, coffee was boiling, and corn cakes smoked in the pan. He stopped halfway down the ladder. Eleanor stood at the table Wade used for accounts, now scrubbed clean and set with 2 tin plates. "There is breakfast. I smell that. It is not charity. It is rent." His mouth moved, as though it might have become a smile in a different man. "Yes, ma'am." They ate with the curtain open but the back door ajar, because propriety in Cedar Flats required witnesses even if the witnesses were chickens. There were no chickens yet, but Mrs. Bell's Ruth appeared after 10 minutes carrying laundry and curiosity. "Mrs. Bell says I'm to fetch your sheets for washing," Ruth said. "They are not dirty. She says cleanliness is the Lord's shield against gossip." Wade coughed into his coffee. Eleanor sent the sheets. After that, the days arranged themselves around work. Wade opened the shop at sunrise. Men brought horses to be shod, wagon wheels to be rimmed, hinges to be mended, plowshares to be sharpened. Sparks flew from the anvil like angry fireflies. Wade spoke little, but his hands were eloquent. He could look at a cracked wagon bracket and know where strain had betrayed it. He could quiet a nervous mare by resting one soot-dark palm against her neck. He could mend a child's broken hoop as seriously as he mended a rancher's gate. Eleanor cleaned the back room, then the corner stove, then shelves. Nobody had wiped since Emma Hawthorne died. She washed the window until the yard stopped looking like a punishment. She shook out the braided rug and stitched the torn edge. She bought beans, flour, coffee, salt pork, and dried apples with $2 of her own money, and wrote every penny in a ledger. At first Wade resisted the ledger. "You don't have to count coffee by the spoon. I do if I am to know what I cost. You cost less than an empty room. That is not an accounting method." He looked at her a long moment, then took a pencil and wrote beside her list, "Shoeing bay gelding, 50 cents. Hinge repair, 15 cents. Wagon rim, $1. She glanced at him. He shrugged. "If we're counting." So they counted. Meals became the borderland where 2 guarded people met without naming it. Breakfast was corn cakes, coffee, sometimes eggs from Mrs. Bell when she had extra. Dinner was beans with onion, potatoes baked in ash, bread if Eleanor had time, stew if Wade brought meat from a rancher who paid in kind. Supper was often leftovers eaten by lamplight, while the forge cooled and the town noises faded. The first week, Wade ate quickly and rose as if food were a task. The second week he began washing his hands before sitting down without Eleanor asking. The third week, he came in one evening with a sack of flour over his shoulder and set it beside the stove. "That is too much," Eleanor said. "Mrs. Bell said you make bread when flour ain't guarded like gold." "I said no such thing." "You said it with your face. My face is not an invoice." He looked at her then, and this time, the almost smile arrived. It changed him so briefly, she might have missed it if she had been stirring the pot. But she saw. She carried that small warmth through the evening, like a coal cupped in her palm. The town did not soften so quickly. Mrs. Pritchard refused to sell Eleanor ribbon at the mercantile until Wade came in behind her to buy horseshoe nails. Then the ribbon appeared, though Mrs. Pritchard handled it as if it were evidence. At church, 2 women shifted down the pew when Eleanor sat. Mrs. Bell, seeing this, marched across the aisle and sat beside Eleanor so hard the hymnals jumped. Silas Delacour attended that Sunday in a black coat, handsome and injured-looking. He let people see him lower his head during prayer. After service, he stood beneath a cottonwood, and spoke quietly to men who owed him money. Wade waited beside his horse at the hitching rail. Eleanor came down the church steps with Mrs. Bell. Her gray dress was clean, her gloves mended at 2 fingers. She felt every eye on her. Silas stepped into her path. Eleanor. She stopped because running once had been necessary, but running forever would become a cage. Mr. Delacour. His smile was sorrowful enough for witnesses. I have prayed for you. That was generous. I am still willing to forgive. There is nothing between us requiring your forgiveness. A murmur moved among the churchgoers. Silas lowered his voice. Do not make me show the agreement. Show it. His eyes sharpened. Eleanor's heart struck hard against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. Show all of it, including my father's debt, including the interest you added after he died, including the line where you wrote that my refusal would permit you to collect double. Show them the price you put on mercy. Silas' face changed by a degree too small for others to notice. Wade noticed. So did Sheriff Pike, standing by the church gate. You are overwrought, Silas said. No, I am hungry, tired, ashamed, and angry. Those are not the same as confused. Mrs. Bell's mouth twitched. Silas glanced toward Wade. Has he taught you to speak this way? Eleanor looked at Wade too. He stood still, hat in hand, jaw tight, ready, but not stepping in. No, she said. He taught me that a person can sit at a table without owning the one who serves the meal. The murmurs deepened. Silas' smile vanished. You will come to me before this is finished. Eleanor walked around him. Wade helped Mrs. Bell into the wagon first, then offered Eleanor his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His palm was rough, warm, and careful. He did not squeeze. He did not linger, but he did not let go until she was steady on the wagon step. That night, rain came. Arizona rain did not ask permission. It slammed down out of a dark sky, hard enough to flatten dust and turn ruts to red mud within minutes. The shop roof began leaking over the nail barrels. Wade cursed under his breath and climbed up with a bucket, while Eleanor moved sacks of coal and covered tools with canvas. Water ran beneath the back door. My rooms, he said. By the time they reached it, rain had found the window frame and dripped onto the cot. Eleanor pulled the blanket away, but one corner was already soaked. Wade stood in the doorway, rainwater dripping from his hair. You can take the loft? No. Cot's wet. I can sleep in the chair. Don't be foolish. Do not order me. He closed his mouth. Thunder rolled low over the flats. Eleanor pressed both hands to the wet blanket. She was suddenly so tired she could not separate one fear from another. I know what people say. I know what he wants them to say. If I sleep in your loft, he wins without touching me. Wade looked at the water dripping steadily into the tin cup she had set beneath the leak. Then I'll sleep in the shop and you take the dry side of the cot. The floor is mud. I've slept worse. I do not doubt it. But I will not have you ill because I am proud. His gaze met hers. I am doing it for pride. That silenced her. Rain beat the roof. The red ribbon on the wall stirred in the draft. Wade looked at it, and then away. Eleanor softened her voice. Tell me what you mean. He wiped rain from his jaw with one hand. I mean there are not many things a man can do after he failed once. Failed whom? He was quiet so long, she thought he would not answer. My sister wrote me 3 letters before she came home. I answered the first. The second came when I was driving cattle north. The third I carried in my pocket 2 months before I opened it. His throat moved. She said she was hungry, said she was scared of her husband, said she was ashamed to come home with a child and no ring worth keeping. I thought if I waited she'd tell me it had passed. Eleanor stood still. She came home half dead, he said. Asked me at the depot if I had any bread. Not help, not forgiveness. Bread. His eyes stayed on the floor. She died thinking she had been a burden. The rain seemed to hush around the edges of his words. Eleanor picked up the dry end of the blanket and folded it over the chair. What was her child's name? Lydia. You send money. He looked up, startled. Mrs. Bell told me. He nodded once. My aunt keeps her. Does Lydia know that I send money? That you loved her mother? His face closed like a door barred from within. She was a baby. Babies grow. He said nothing. Eleanor took the tin cup from beneath the leak and emptied it into the wash basin. I will take the chair by the stove in the shop. You take the floor near the forge. We will both be uncomfortable, and nobody will win. Wade stared at her. Then, to her surprise, he laughed once. It was rough and brief, like a hinge breaking free of rust. Ah, right. They spent the stormy night in the shop with the forge banked low for warmth. Eleanor sat wrapped in the brown shawl, her feet on an upturned crate. Wade lay on a canvas near the anvil, one arm over his eyes. Water dripped into 3 buckets at 3 different tempos. The room smelled of damp coal, wet wool, and cooling iron. Sometime after midnight, Eleanor woke to find Wade sitting upright, breathing hard. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm all right. You are not. He pressed the heel of his hand against his burned forearm. The scar there, usually hidden by his sleeve, shone pale and twisted in the forge glow. Old pain, he said. She rose, took the kettle from the stove, and poured warm water into a basin. From her carpet bag, she brought a small tin of salve. He hesitated. I helped my father when his hands cramped from writing, she said. I know enough not to be foolish. Slowly, Wade held out his arm. She sat on the crate beside him and pushed his sleeve back. The burn had healed long ago, but badly. Ridged skin crossed his forearm from wrist to elbow. She did not gasp. She warmed salve between her fingers and touched him carefully. His whole body stiffened. Too much? No, she worked in silence. The rain tapped the roof. The scar tissue resisted beneath her fingers, then slowly yielded. What happened? She asked. Barn fire. Horse trap? I got the horse out, and your leg beam came down. You saved the horse? Yes. Was it yours? She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the forge. Belonged to a boy who had already lost his father. Horse was all he had. Eleanor wrapped the arm in clean linen. You are not a man who fails as often as you believe. Wade's voice was barely there. You don't know that? She tied the linen off. No, but I am learning to count better. He looked at her then, not with romance, not yet, with something more fragile, as if he had been seen in bad light and not judged. In the morning, the storm had washed Cedar Flats clean and left the street a red-brown ribbon of mud. Wade repaired the window frame before breakfast. Eleanor made biscuits on the shop stove because the boarding house oven was full. Ruth came running to borrow a pan and found them both weary-eyed, solemn, and smelling of smoke. By noon, the town had added a storm night scandal to the old one. By sundown, Wade had nailed a sign beside the back room door where anyone entering from the yard could see it. Room let to Miss Eleanor Langley, by agreement witnessed by Mrs. Abigail Bell. No credit, no gossip, no trespass. Eleanor read it twice. No gossip? Hopeful line. You painted it crooked. I'm a blacksmith, not a schoolmaster. She touched the edge of the sign. Thank you. He shrugged, uncomfortable again. It's only pine. It is not. The weeks that followed did not become easy, but they became shape. Eleanor found work mending shirts for 2 ranch hands who were too ashamed to admit they could not sew buttons. Then she began baking bread for Mrs. Bell's boarders, then for the livery, then for a widow named Mrs. Alvarez, who paid in eggs and brought Eleanor chilies wrapped in cloth. Eleanor learned which flour stretched, which beans softened if soaked overnight, which men paid promptly, which women softened when handed warm bread without being asked for kindness first. The blacksmith shop changed by inches. A curtain appeared over the back window, made from a flour sack washed thin and embroidered with blue thread. A clay pot of basil sat on the sill. Wade came in one evening to find the account table cleared, sanded, and rubbed with oil until the grain showed. He stood looking at it a long time. Eleanor, kneading dough, said, "I did not move your order book. I see that. I see that. If you dislike it, I can." "No." He set his hat on the peg by the door instead of the table. After that, he always used the peg. One Thursday, a boy named Tommy Pike, the sheriff's youngest, brought a broken wagon toy into the shop. Wade crouched to inspect it, his big hands gentle around the little wooden axle. "Can you fix it?" Tommy asked. "My bay." "My ma says don't trouble you if you're busy." "I am busy." The boy's face fell. Wade took the toy. "Ain't troubled." Eleanor watched from the stove as Wade cut a tiny iron pin, fitted it through the axle, and turned the wheels with solemn concentration. Tommy waited as if witnessing surgery. When the wagon rolled straight, Tommy's eyes shone. "How much? Can you carry a bucket?" "Yes, sir. Fill the rain barrel halfway." Tommy ran for the bucket. Eleanor smiled down at the dough. Wade glanced at her. "What? Nothing. That smile means something." "It means you are a poor businessman," he grunted. "Boy paid in water. The going rate for axle work?" "Depends on the boy." Tommy returned with half the bucket spilled down his front. Proud as a banker, Wade accepted the payment gravely. That evening, Eleanor made apple pudding from dry slices and molasses. She served Wade a larger portion than usual. He looked at it. "What's this for?" "For the water." "I didn't fetch it." "No, You taught a boy his work had value." He stared at the pudding as if it had accused him of tenderness. Then he ate it down to the last spoonful. September burned hot. The sky went white by noon, and the forge became near unbearable. Wade worked stripped to his undershirt when no ladies were near, then reached for his overshirt in a hurry if Eleanor came through. She pretended not to notice the haste, because dignity sometimes meant letting a man keep his awkwardness. One afternoon, Wade returned from shoeing horses at the bar, with a split lip and dust on his back. Eleanor set down the coffee pot. "What happened?" "Nothing. That is a great deal of blood for nothing." "Horse jerked?" "Did the horse wear a signet ring?" Wade gave her a look. She took a clean cloth from the line. Said he did not sit. "Mr. Hawthorne." "He sat?" She dampened the cloth and touched his lip. "Who?" He looked past her. "Delacour's man. Fellow named Cray." "Why?" "Said something." "What?" "Nothing worth repeating." She lowered the cloth. "About me." Wade's silence answered. Heat rose in Eleanor's chest, part anger, part fear, part something more dangerous, because it had to do with him being hurt on her behalf. "You promised he could talk to the sheriff. Wasn't Delacour?" "You know what I mean." He said it in front of the Bar C boys, and striking him improved my reputation. "I didn't strike first. That is a child's defense." His eyes flashed. "I ain't a child." "No. You are a man with a split lip and a town already hungry for proof that I bring trouble." Wade stood. "You think I don't know that? I think you forget that I must live with the story after men finish fighting over it." The words hit him. He stepped back as if she had shoved him. Eleanor regretted the sharpness, but not the truth. Wade picked up his hat. "I'll sleep in the forge tonight." "You always sleep in the forge." "I mean I'll not need supper." He walked out into the yard. Eleanor stood with the bloody cloth in her hand, breathing hard. The pot on the stove boiled over and hissed. She lifted it too late. Coffee ran down the iron and filled the room with a bitter smell. She did not call him back. That night, she set one covered plate on the table and one cup beside it. Then she went to her room and closed the door. Through the wall, she heard Wade come in long after dark, heard him pause, heard the chair move, heard the fork against the plate. In the morning, the plate had been washed and put away. No apology sat beside it. Wade was not a man who knew how to write one in words, but the woodbox was full. The yard had been swept. Her dull kitchen knife had been sharpened until it could slice paper. At breakfast, he said, "You were right." Eleanor poured coffee. "I was angry." Still right? She set his cup down. What did Mr. Cray say? Wade's mouth hardened. I would rather know. He looked at the cup, then at her. He said Delacour didn't need a church to get what was owed, said a woman living behind a blacksmith shop. Had already named her price. Eleanor closed her eyes. Wade's voice roughened. I am sorry. She opened them. For what he said? For making you carry my answer to it. She sat across from him. The first light came through the flour sack curtain, turning the table pale. When I left the church, I thought freedom would feel clean. It doesn't. It feels like washing the same dish while someone keeps throwing mud in the basin. Wade's hands circled his coffee cup. What do you need? The question was so plain she could not answer quickly. At last she said, I need to earn enough to leave if I choose. I need the town to see me working before it sees me weeping. And I need you not to bleed unless I ask for blood. His mouth twitched despite the bruising. That last one might be hard. Practice, yes, Mammon, and you? He looked surprised. What do you need, Wade? It was the first time she had spoken his Christian name. He noticed, the cup stilled between his hands. I don't know, he said. That answer stayed with her longer than any confession could have. In late September, a letter came from Tucson. Wade recognized the handwriting before he opened it. His aunt wrote in a cramped, slanting hand, each line crowded as if paper cost more than truth. He took the letter outside to the anvil and read it standing. Eleanor was rolling pie crust when she saw his face through the open door. Is it bad? He folded the letter badly, crushing one corner. Lydia's coming. Your niece? He nodded. Aunt Marta's husband died. She's going to live with her son in California. Says she can't take Lydia. How old is Lydia now? 6. When? Stage due Saturday. Eleanor wiped flour from her hands. Then we need a bet. No. She paused. No. Shall go to Mrs. Bell until I find a family. The words were too quick. Eleanor walked to the doorway. A family? A proper one. You are her family. I live in a blacksmith shop. You live above one. She could have my room. And you. I can return to Mrs. Bell or sleep in the storeroom. Nah. The flatness in his voice startled her. Wade turned away, ripping the letter. I don't know how to raise a girl. No one knows until the child is there. I know iron, horses, bad weather. I know how to keep accounts and how to hold a hoof before it kicks. Then raising a child, it is some of it. He shook his head. She needs softness. She needs truth first. His expression sharpened. And what truth? That her mother came home ruined and died over there at Mrs. Bell's table. That her uncle sent money because he was too cowardly to visit. Eleanor stepped fully into the yard. Yes, that what you believe? It's what happened. No, it is what shame tells when it wants the whole room. Wade looked at her then, anger and fear mixed so tightly. They could not be separated. Don't what? Don't make it sound simple. I would never. The dust moved around them. Inside, the pie crust dried on the table. Eleanor softened. Wade, I am not asking you to become perfect by Saturday. I am asking you not to abandon a child because you are afraid she will see where you hurt. He looked away. The letter trembled slightly in his hand. At last he said, She might hate me. Then feed her anyway. Saturday brought a pale yellow morning and a stagecoach in a cloud of dust. Wade stood at the depot in a clean shirt, hat turning in his hands. Eleanor stood beside Mrs. Bell, holding a small cloth bundle of bread, cheese, and apples because children were less frightened when someone had thought of food. The stage door opened. A thin girl with dark braids climbed down, holding a carpet bag, nearly as large as herself. She wore a brown dress gone short at the wrists and shoes scuffed white at the toes. Her eyes were Wade's eyes, but warier. She looked at the town, the men, the horses, the sky, then at Wade. Nobody moved. Mrs. Bell whispered, Go on, fool. Wade took one step. Lydia, the girl clutched the carpet bow. Aunt Marta said, "You're my Uncle Wade." "I am." "You didn't come before?" The words struck clean. Wade swallowed. "No, why?" The deep platform seemed to hold its breath. Wade crouched slowly, so his face was nearer hers. "Because I was ashamed and foolish, not because I didn't want you." Lydia studied him. Children could be merciless with truth because they had not yet learned how adults decorate lies. "Do you have food?" she asked. Eleanor's throat tightened. Wade looked back at her for half a second, then took the bundle she held. He offered it to Lydia. Yes, Lydia accepted the bread first. She bit into it with a hunger that made Eleanor's eyes sting. Wade rose carefully. "I have a room for you, with a door. Yes, with a bed, by nightfall." Lydia looked at Eleanor. "Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor Langley." "Are you his wife?" "No." "Are you his cook?" Eleanor considered. "Sometimes." "Can you make soup?" "Ah, yes." Lydia nodded, as if this settled her opinion for the day. "I like soup if there's potatoes." Wade let out a breath that might have been pain or relief. The back room changed again. Eleanor moved her things to a curtained corner of Mrs. Bell's attic before Wade could argue. She and Ruth scrubbed the cot frame and filled a new tick with straw. Mrs. Bell donated a quilt. Sheriff Pike brought a little chair his boys had outgrown. Wade made a small iron hook shaped like a bird for Lydia's coat and nailed it low enough for her to reach. Lydia watched every kindness with suspicion. At supper, she sat at the table between Eleanor and Wade, feet not touching the floor. Eleanor served potato soup with onion and bits of salt pork. Lydia ate 3 bowls without speaking. Wade ate 1 and mostly watched her. "You're staring," Lydia said. Wade looked down at his bowl. "Sorry, my ma stared at me when she was sick." The spoon stopped in Eleanor's hand. Wade's face tightened. "Do you remember her?" "A little," she sang when she wasn't coughing. Lydia pushed a potato around her bowl. Aunt Marta said Ma made poor choices. The room went very still. Wade's hand closed slowly around his spoon. Eleanor feared he might bend it. Instead, he set it down. "Your ma was brave," he said. His voice had gravel in it. "She came home when it was hard. She loved you. Any other talk you hear, you bring it to me." Lydia looked at him. "Did you love her?" Wade bowed his head once. "Yes." "Then why didn't you come?" Eleanor wished she could gather the child away from that question, but it belonged between them. Wade looked at his niece. "Because I thought shame was bigger than love. I was wrong." Lydia absorbed this with solemn eyes. Then she lifted her bowl. "Can I have more soup?" Eleanor rose quickly, grateful for the stove, the ladle, the steam that hit her face. From then on, the table became the place where the 3 of them learned the shape of one another. Lydia woke early and hungry. She feared closed doors. She hid crusts of bread under her pillow until ants found them. She asked direct questions at inconvenient times. She followed Wade around the shop until he made her sit on a flour sack outside the forge line and told her the names of tools. "That is a rasp. That is a pritchel. That is a fuller. Don't touch that unless you want a hand with fewer fingers," Lydia asked. "What's that big hammer?" "Trouble. Can I use it?" "No." "When I'm bigger?" "No." Eleanor laughed from the stove. Wade glanced over. "Do not encourage her," she asked with confidence. She asked for maiming. Lydia looked at Eleanor. "Do you like him?" Eleanor dropped a spoon, which struck the iron too hard, sending sparks wild. Lydia looked between them. "Aunt Mara says grown folks lie with their faces. Yours both just did." "He ate your bread," Wade said. "I am. Eat it quieter." Lydia tried to chew quietly, which made Eleanor laugh again, and once she began, she could not stop. It was not a grand laugh. It shook a little and had tears behind it, but it filled the shop with something that had been absent too long. Wade watched her with an expression almost fearful. That night, Lydia had a nightmare. Eleanor woke in Mrs. Bell's attic to Ruth shaking her shoulder. "Miss Langley, Mr. Hawthorne's at the back gate. He says Lydia want quiet." Eleanor pulled on her dress and hurried through the dark with Mrs. Bell's shawl around her shoulders. The shop glowed with lamplight. Lydia sat on the cot, sobbing in sharp, breathless bursts, while Wade knelt helplessly beside her with a cup of water. "I didn't know what to do," he said. Eleanor sat on the edge of the cot. "Lydia, may I touch your back?" The child shook her head, then nodded, then leaned suddenly into Eleanor's side. Eleanor held her lightly. "You are in Cedar Flats. You are in your room. Your uncle is here. The stove is warm. There is bread for morning." Lydia hiccuped. "I dreamed Aunt Martha left me at the depot, and nobody came." Wade closed his eyes. Eleanor smoothed the child's braid. "But someone did come. He came late." "Yes," Eleanor said softly. "Late is not never." Wade looked at her. Lydia cried until exhaustion took her. Eleanor laid her down, tucked the quilt under her chin, and set a heel of bread on a plate beside the bed where Lydia would see it if she woke. Outside the room, Wade stood in the shop with his hands hanging uselessly. "Thank you," he said. "She needs to know food will remain." "I didn't think of that." "You will next time." He nodded, but his face remained stricken. "You should sleep." "I'm sorry Ruth had to wake you." Eleanor looked toward Lydia's door. "I can stay in the chair until dawn." "No, folks will talk." "They already do." "I care." The words were simple, too simple. Eleanor looked up. Wade seemed almost angry with himself, but he continued, "I care what they put on you." A warmth rose in her that had nothing to do with the stove. "Then leave the shop door open and bring the chair near the forge. You sleep in the loft. I will sit where anyone passing could see me if they were rude enough to look." He studied her. "You got a rule for every trouble." "No, only the troubles I have met before." He carried the chair for her. At dawn, he woke to find Eleanor asleep sitting upright, shawl slipping from one shoulder, one hand resting near the plate with bread. Lydia slept soundly beyond the half-open door. Wade climbed down quietly. He did not touch Eleanor. He only took his coat from the peg and laid it over her shoulders. When she woke, coffee was ready. Not good coffee. Wade's coffee could have stripped paint from a wagon, but it was hot, and he had set a cup near her hand. October brought cooler nights, a blue edge to the mornings, and trouble in polished boots. Silas Delacour filed his claim. He accused Eleanor of defrauding him of wedding expenses, clothing, settlement of debt, and reputational injury. Reputational injury was written in such elegant script that Sheriff Pike read it aloud twice and laughed once, which he covered with a cough. The hearing was set before Judge Hollis in 2 weeks. The town sharpened itself around the date. Mrs. Pritchard declared that women who broke engagements threatened the moral order. Mrs. Alvarez said moral order had never baked a loaf of bread in her kitchen, so she would reserve judgment. The Barcy boys, still loyal to Wade after the fight with Cray, began eating at Mrs. Bell's twice a week just to irritate Silas. Mrs. Bell raised their price for the privilege. Eleanor worked harder. She baked before dawn, mended in the afternoon, helped Lydia with letters, kept Wade's accounts, and wrote to Prescott asking for copies of her father's debt papers. Each evening, she checked her $7.18, now grown to $12.42. Not enough to pay Silas, not enough to leave, enough to prove she was not standing still. One night, she found Wade at the account table, turning the pencil between his fingers. "What is it?" He pushed a small cloth bag toward her. She opened it. Coins gleamed inside. "No, you don't know what it's for." "I know enough." "It is a loan." "No." His brows drew together. "You can pay him and be clear. I will not buy peace with your winter money." "Winter, and here it comes every year." He leaned back. "You are stubborn." "Yes." "Proud." "Yes." "Scared." Her answer caught. Wade's face softened barely. "I am too." She sat across from him. The shop was quiet except for Lydia breathing softly in the back room and the faint scrape of a mouse near the coal bin. "If I take your money," Eleanor said, "Silas will say he was right, that I only traded one man's keeping for another. Let him say it. I cannot live by letting men say anything they please. You can't stop every mouth, no, but I can keep my own name clean inside my own hearing." Wade looked at the money bag. "Then what can I do?" She touched the edge of the ledger. "Stand where you can tell the truth if asked. Not more, not less." His voice lowered. "No, no," she said. He waited. She looked toward Lydia's room. "If this goes badly, do not send her away because the town makes life hard." Pain crossed his face. "You think I would?" "I think fear makes us betray what we love and call it protection." He was silent a long time. Then he drew the money bag back and set it beside his account book. "All right." The night before the hearing, Eleanor could not sleep. She came from Mrs. Bell's attic to the shop because she had left her Bible there after reading with Lydia. The forge was dark. The moon laid a pale square on the floor. Wade sat at the table, awake. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." She took her Bible from the shelf, but did not leave. On the table lay a small iron object. A ring, not a finger ring, but a round napkin ring or curtain ring, forged smooth with a little twist at the joint. "What is that?" "Nothing." "Wait." He looked embarrassed. Lydia wanted something to hold the flour sack curtain back in the day. "The string keeps breaking." Eleanor picked it up. It was warm from his hand, balanced and plain. The joint worked into the shape of a small leaf. "It is beautiful. It's useful. Things might be both." He looked at her then. Moonlight cut his face into hard and gentle planes. "My mother had curtains," he said, "yellow ones. After she died, Pa took them down. Said cloth near a stove was foolish. House never looked right after." Eleanor held the ring in her palm. "Why did you become a blacksmith?" "After the burn, I could not ride long. My father said a lame cowboy was a hungry cowboy. Old Mr. Kern needed help at the forge. Iron did not care if I limped. That sounds lonely. It was honest. Lonely things often are." He studied her. "What did you want before all this?" The question startled her because no one had asked it in years. She looked at the moonlit table, the Bible, the curtain ring, the pencil savings, a kitchen with a window over the sink, not a large house, just one with morning light. "I wanted to teach children letters, grow herbs, keep my own accounts, have a table where no one sat down angry on purpose. That's all?" She smiled sadly. "That is a great deal." He nodded as if she had named land, cattle, gold. "And you?" she asked. Wade's eyes shifted toward the back room, where Lydia slept. "I wanted quiet," he said. "You have that." "No," I had silence. "It ain't the same." The words settled between them. Eleanor closed her hand around the curtain ring. "No, it is not." For one dangerous moment, she wanted to reach across the table and touch his hand. Not as nurse, not as cook, not as tenant. Just because it was there and she knew the shape of its scars. She did not. Wade did not either. But neither looked away. The hearing took place in the schoolhouse because the courthouse room was too small for so much curiosity. Judge Hollis sat behind the teacher's desk, spectacles low on his nose. Sheriff Pike stood by the door. Silas Delacour arrived with his papers, his polished sorrow, and a lawyer from Prescott named Mr. Vane, who had the expression of a man smelling profit. Eleanor, her gray dress, clean and plain. Mrs. Bell had pressed it. Mrs. Alvarez had given her a white collar. Lydia had insisted she carry a handkerchief, in case men get stupid and make you cry. Wade stood at the back of the room, not beside her, because she had asked him not to make the hearing look like a rescue. Silas spoke first through his lawyer. There were debts. There had been an understanding. "Mr. Delacour, out of generosity and honorable intention, had settled claims against the late Mr. Langley. Miss Langley had accepted gifts, housing, garments, and engagement arrangements, then fled without cause, causing humiliation and financial loss. Mr. Vane placed the papers on the desk. Judge Hollis read them slowly. Eleanor listened. She did not look at Silas. She looked at the ink. That had a smell to her now, though no one else noticed it. Dust, old grief, and men's breath too close. When asked to speak, she rose. "My father owed money," she said. "I do not dispute that. I dispute the use Mr. Delacourt made of it." Mr. Vane smiled. "Miss Langley, did you accept his proposal?" "Yes, did." "Did you accept his payment of your father's debts?" "I was told they were paid as kindness toward my future husband's household." A murmur. "Did you wear the wedding dress purchased by Mr. Delacourt?" "I wore it until he took my wrist and told me to smile because I owed him." Silas shifted. Mr. Vane's smile cooled. "You have no witness to that?" "No," Eleanor said. "Men who speak that way often wait until witnesses are admiring the flowers." Mrs. Bell made a sound like a cough and a laugh fighting in her throat. Judge Hollis glanced at Silas. "Let her finish." Eleanor unfolded the letter Silas had sent after she fled. Her fingers did not tremble. "He wrote that my father's name remained in his hands. He wrote that he would protect himself publicly. He did." The judge read the letter. Silence spread. Mr. Vane adjusted his cuff. "A private emotional note is hardly—" Sheriff Pike interrupted from the door. "Judge, got a rider from Prescott this morning. Papers Miss Langley requested." Dusty young man brought a packet forward. Eleanor had not known whether it would arrive. Her knees nearly weakened, but she locked them. Judge Hollis opened the packet. The room waited. He read one sheet, then another. His face changed. "Mr. Delacourt," he said, "this debt from Langley Sr. to Mercer Frey was settled from the estate 6 months before your claimed payment." Silas' smile did not move. "An error in copying, perhaps. And this note to Bancroft's Supplies shows an interest rate beyond legal allowance." Mr. Vane leaned forward. Judge Hollis lifted a third paper. "And here is a receipt showing you purchased the wedding dress on account under your own name, not Miss Langley's." The room stirred like a kicked anthill. Silas stood. "This is irrelevant." Eleanor looked at him then. "No, it is the table with the cloth pulled back." His eyes were no longer polished. They were hard and flat. "You think these people will save you," he said. "They will eat your bread and talk filth behind your back before the plate is cold." Wade moved at the back. Eleanor saw him and gave the smallest shake of her head. He stopped. Silas laughed bitterly. "Look at him. The blacksmith trained like a dog at your glass." The room gasped. Wade's face went white around the mouth. Eleanor turned fully toward Silas. "You are mistaken again. Wade Hawthorne is not trained by me. He is trusted by me." That is why he stopped. Every eye shifted to Wade. He stood there in his clean shirt, burned hand at his side, scarred and silent, and more dignified than any man in polished boots. Judge Hollis struck the desk with his palm. "Enough. Mr. Delacourt, your claim is dismissed pending review of these debt instruments." "Sheriff, I want copies sent to Prescott." "Mr. Vane, advise your client to remain available." The schoolhouse exploded into whispers. Silas gathered his papers with murder in his movements. As he passed Eleanor, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. "This town will tire of feeding strays." Before fear could answer, Lydia's small voice rang from the back. "She ain't a stray. She feeds us." Everyone turned. Lydia stood beside Wade, fists clenched, braids crooked. Her face was pale but fierce. Wade laid a hand lightly on her shoulder, not to silence her, to steady her. Silas left with a first true stain on his public coat. After the hearing, people changed in the way people do when truth becomes safer than cruelty. Mrs. Pritchard still did not apologize, but she sold Eleanor sugar at fair weight. The Barcy boys tipped their hats. Sheriff Pike bought 2 loaves and said his wife had always believed Silas was too smooth by half, which Mrs. Pike later denied because she preferred her opinions delivered directly. But victory had edges. 2 nights later, the blacksmith shop burned. It began near the coal shed after midnight. Eleanor woke in Mrs. Bell's attic to bells, shouting, an orange light flickering against the window. She knew before Ruth cried out. She ran barefoot, halfway down the stairs before Mrs. Bell caught her and shoved boots into her hands. By the time Eleanor reached the street, smoke boiled above Hawthorne Ironworks. Men formed a bucket line from the town pump. The livery horses screamed. Sparks lifted into the black sky. "Lydia!" Eleanor shouted. Wade burst from the shop carrying the child wrapped in a quilt. His face was blackened with smoke. He thrust Lydia into Mrs. Bell's arms and turned back. Eleanor grabbed his sleeve. "No, my account books. Let them burn. My tools. Wade!" He looked at her, wild with loss. The forge, the shop, Emma's room, the place he had built out of failure and iron. All of it roared behind him. Then from inside came the terrified whinny of a horse. The livery's side wall had caught, and one mare was trapped near the adjoining stall. Wade pulled free. Eleanor ran after him without thinking. Smoke hit like a wall. Heat clawed her face. Wade seized a wet blanket from a barrel and threw it over her shoulders. "Get out! Not without you!" He did not argue because the mare screamed again. They moved bent low through smoke and sparks. Wade kicked at a jammed stall door. It held. He swung a hammer once, twice, 3 times, each blow ringing under the fire's roar. Eleanor coughed so hard her eyes streamed. She saw the latch, red-hot and twisted, and wrapped her skirt around her hand before lifting the drop bolt. The door flew inward. The mare lunged. Wade caught the bridle and was nearly dragged down. Eleanor slapped the animal's flank and shouted the way she had heard ranch women shout at stubborn milk cows. Together they forced the mare toward the alley where men reached through smoke and took hold. A beam cracked overhead. Wade shoved Eleanor first. She fell into mud and hands. Behind her, the beam came down. For one impossible second, Wade disappeared in sparks. Then he staggered out, one sleeve burning. Eleanor tore at it with both hands, beating flame from cloth and scarred skin. Wade dropped to his knees. She knelt in front of him, coughing, sobbing, furious. "You fool!" she cried. "You absolute fool!" He blinked through smoke. "Horse got out. I do not care about the horse. You opened the latch. I care about you." The words came out in front of the whole town, raw and unhidden. Wade stared at her. Around them, men still shouted. Water splashed. The roof of Hawthorne Ironworks groaned and folded inward, sending sparks up like a swarm of fiery bees. But for Eleanor, the world had narrowed to Wade's burned sleeve beneath her hands, and his soot-blackened face, looking at her as if he had never been named beloved in any language. Lydia broke from Mrs. Bell and threw herself against Wade's back, crying into his shoulder. He closed one arm around the child and kept the other hand on Eleanor's wrist, not gripping, only there. By dawn, the shop was a smoking skeleton. The forge survived, blackened but standing. The account table was gone. The back room was gone. Lydia's bird hook lay twisted in ash. The red ribbon burned with everything else. Wade stood before the ruins, face unreadable. Eleanor stood beside him in Mrs. Bell's borrowed coat, one hand bandaged where the latch had burned her palm. Sheriff Pike came from the alley, holding a broken bottle that smells of kerosene. Nobody said Silas' name at first. They did not need to. But proof is a stubborn animal. It will not come just because grief calls. Silas Delacourt was gone by breakfast, supposedly on business to Prescott. His rooms were empty. His man Cray had ridden out before dawn. Wade's insurance, such as it was, would cover almost nothing. His winter coal was ruined. 2 custom orders were destroyed. tools could be replaced, but only with money he did not have. That afternoon, Wade took the cloth money bag from Mrs. Bell's safe, the one he had offered Eleanor, and poured it onto Abigail Bell's kitchen table. "Lydia needs a place," he said. "I'll send her to Tucson until I rebuild." Lydia, sitting in the corner with Tommy Pike's old wagon toy, went still. Eleanor looked at Wade as if he had struck the table between them. "No, she can't sleep in ashes. She can sleep at Mrs. Bell's." "For how long?" "I've no shop, no room, no decent claim to keep her." "You are frightened." "I am practical." "You are running." His eyes flashed. "I stayed in a burning building. Ice. Fire is easier for you than being needed," Mrs. Bell murmured. Mrs. Bell murmured, "Lord, child." Wade's face hardened. "You don't know what it is to fail a family." Eleanor's voice shook. "I know what it is to be handed away for someone else's convenience." Lydia made a small sound. Wade looked at the child. His anger broke, and beneath it was terror. "I can't feed you proper," he said to Lydia. Lydia's chin trembled. "I don't eat fancy. I've no room. I can sleep small. I don't know how." "You can learn," Eleanor said. He turned on her. "And you? What are you going to do? Make bread from smoke? Sleep in Mrs. Bell's attic forever? Let this town drag your name with mine until you can't earn a nickel?" Eleanor's burned hand throbbed inside the bandage. "Do not use me as your noble excuse." He looked away. She stepped closer. "Look at me." He did. "I can leave," she said softly. "I have wanted to. I have planned to. I have counted coins for it every night. But I am still here because the table we made in that shop was the first place in years where food did not taste like death. You did not own me. You did not rush me. You did not make a rescue into a cage." His breath caught. "And if you send Lydia away now, this fire will have burned more than wood." Silence filled the kitchen. Wade looked at Lydia. The child stood thin and scared, holding the little wagon with the repaired axle. "Uncle Wade," she whispered, "I can help fill water barrels." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in him had surrendered, but not to defeat. He knelt before her. "I was wrong." Lydia's mouth wobbled. "About sending me. About thinking fear gets to make the decisions." She threw her arms around his neck. Wade held her carefully at first, then tightly. Eleanor turned away to give them privacy and found Mrs. Bell wiping her eyes with her apron while pretending to check the biscuits. Rebuilding began with a table, not a forge, not a wall, a table. The old one had burned, so Wade dragged 2 scorched planks from the ruin, found one unburned beam near the yard, and spent an entire evening planing, sanding, fitting, and swearing softly under his breath. Eleanor sat nearby, sorting nails from ash. Lydia washed salvageable hinges in a basin. Tommy Pike brought water. Ruth brought scraps. Mrs. Alvarez brought beans. The Baha'i boys brought lumber from a collapsed shed. Sheriff Pike brought news that Silas had indeed fled to Prescott, and inquiries were being made regarding fraud and arson. By lamplight behind Mrs. Bell's boarding house, Wade set the finished table on 4 mismatched legs. It was ugly. It was sturdy. Eleanor ran her good hand over the top. One plank bore a black burn mark down the center, smooth now beneath Wade's work. "We will need to oil it," she said. Wade watched her face. "You hate it. I love it." The word came too easily. Neither moved. Lydia, who had no patience for grown-up fear, said, "Can we eat on it now?" So they did. Mrs. Bell set out beans, bread, pickles, and coffee. Mrs. Alvarez brought a pot of stew rich with chalice and goat meat. Men who had once whispered about Eleanor stood in the yard with hats in hand and accepted tin plates. Women came too, some curious, some ashamed, some practical enough to understand that fire could take any roof. Mrs. Pritchard arrived last, carrying a sack of sugar. She approached Eleanor stiffly. For baking, Eleanor took it. "Thank you." Mrs. Pritchard looked as if the next words were choking her on the way out. I repeated things I had no right to repeat. The yard quieted. Eleanor could have made the apologies smaller or larger. She could have handed shame back. Instead, she said, "Then let this be the last place they are heard." Mrs. Pritchard nodded, red-faced, and went to help Ruth with cups. Wade stood by the new table, watching Eleanor with an expression that made Mrs. Bell suddenly decide everyone needed more coffee far away from them. When the crowd thinned and Lydia fell asleep on a quilt near the kitchen door, Eleanor gathered dirty plates in a tub. Wade came to help. "You should rest your hand," he said. "It is my left. You use both. So do you." They washed dishes side by side in Mrs. Bell's kitchen. He rinsed. She dried. The work was ordinary, and because it was ordinary, it nearly undid her. Plates clinked. Water cooled. Outside, men's voices faded down the street. Lydia murmured in sleep. Wade set a cup on the towel. "Eleanor." She kept drying. "Yes, I got nothing to offer right now but debt, ashes, a child who hides bread, and a table with a burn down the middle." She stilled. "I know you need choice," he said. "I know you fought hard for it, so I ain't asking for an answer tonight. And I ain't asking because folks talk. I'm saying when the shop is rebuilt, or before, or never, if never is what you choose." He swallowed. "There will be a chair at my table that is yours if you want it." Her eyes filled, but she smiled through it. "That is not a proposal most women dream of. No, it is not polished. No, it includes a great many dishes." His mouth softened. "I expect so." She set the towel down. "Wade, I will not marry from gratitude. I don't want you to. I will not marry to repair a reputation. I'd rather burn another shop. And I will not be kept." His voice was steady. "Then don't be. Stand beside me or walk away from me. But don't ever stand under me." The room blurred. She looked at his scarred hand resting near the wash basin. The same hand that had not grabbed her when she swayed. The same hand that had offered a shawl, made a sign, sharpened her knife, touched Lydia's shoulder, rebuilt a table from ash. She placed her burned hand beside it, not touching. "Ask me again when the first loaf comes out of the new oven," she said. He looked at her hand beside his. "All right, and until then?" "Until then?" She picked up the towel again. "You might keep rinsing." For the first time, Wade Hawthorne smiled fully. Winter approached in small warnings. Frost silvered the water troughs. Breath showed at dawn. Mesquite shadows sharpened across the ground. The rebuilt shop rose board by board where the old one had stood, smaller at first, but better planned. Men came after work to help set beams. Eleanor kept coffee hot on a stove in Mrs. Bell's yard and fed anyone willing to lift lumber. She also learned to say no. No to men who thought help entitled them to opinions about her future. No to women who offered sympathy wrapped around questions. No to Silas' lawyer when he sent a final demand for private settlement. She answered that one with Sheriff Pike watching, writing only. Any further claim might be placed before Judge Hollis. "I will not meet alone." Silas did not return. Word came in November that he had been arrested in Prescott on charges connected to false debt papers and suspected arson. Cray, drunk and frightened, had named him. Cedar Flats discussed this for 9 days with great moral satisfaction, as if most of them had not believed him for months. Eleanor did not celebrate. She baked bread. The new shop had a proper kitchen corner, because Wade built it without asking, and Eleanor pretended not to notice until the shelves were up. There was a window over the small washstand. Morning light came through it, just as she had once imagined, falling across tin cups and a blue pitcher. Lydia's room had a real bed, a low hook shaped like a bird, and curtains made from calico Mrs. Alvarez found in a trunk. The child no longer hid bread every night, only on storm nights, and even then she told Eleanor where she put it. "So ants don't get above themselves." Wade slept in the loft, as before. Eleanor stayed at Mrs. Bell's attic as before. The arrangement remained proper, awkward, and full of unsaid things that hung in the air whenever they reached for the same coffee pot. The first loaf came out of the new oven on a cold morning in early December. It was not a grand loaf. The crust cracked on one side, and the bottom darkened because the new stove ran hot. But the smell filled Hawthorne Ironworks with wheat, yeast, smoke, and something like home arriving shyly through the door. Lydia danced around the table. "Can we cut it now?" "It should cool," Eleanor said. "How long?" "Long enough to teach patience." "I hate patience." Wade stood by the stove, freshly washed. Hair combed back, shirt buttoned at the throat, though it was only Tuesday. Mrs. Bell had found reasons to come by 3 times that morning, and finally settled outside the door with Mrs. Alvarez, both women pretending to inspect the new window frame. Eleanor knew. Her hands went clumsy as she lifted the loaf. Wade cleared his throat. "Eleanor." Lydia looked between them and grinned. Eleanor set the bread on the table. "Yes, Wade." He came around the table slowly. In his hand was not a ring from a jeweler. It was a small band of iron, dark and smooth, worked so finely it seemed almost soft. At the join was a tiny leaf, like the curtain ring he had made her, but smaller. "I can buy gold later," he said, then winced as if he had begun badly. Eleanor's eyes filled with laughter and tears both. He tried again. "This ain't payment for what you did. Ain't shelter. Ain't protection from talk. Ain't a bargain made out of fear. It is only me asking." His voice lowered. "Will you marry me, Eleanor Langley, when you are ready, and make this table yours because you choose it?" Lydia whispered loudly. "Say yes if you want soup forever." Wade shut his eyes for one pained second. Eleanor laughed, and the sound trembled. She looked around the shop, the forge waiting for fire, the shelves she had scrubbed, Lydia's crooked braid, the new table with its burned plank sat proudly down the middle, the oven breathing warmth into the cold morning. She thought of a church aisle she had fled, a wedding dress returned in shame, a kitchen where her first free question had been about hunger. "Have you eaten?" She looked at Wade, quiet, scarred, imperfect, standing before her without demand. "Yes," she said. "When I'm ready." He blinked. "That means yes," Lydia informed him. "Just not bossy yes." Eleanor held out her hand. "And I am ready today." Mrs. Bell made a sound outside the door that fooled no one. Wade slid the iron ring onto Eleanor's finger. It fit because, she later learned, Lydia had measured her glove with a piece of string and only told half the town. They were married 1 week later, in the same church Eleanor had run from. But everything was different. She wore no satin. Mrs. Bell altered a blue wool dress and stitched fresh white cuffs at the wrists. Mrs. Alvarez placed dried flowers in Eleanor's hair. Ruth cried before the ceremony began. Lydia stood between Wade and Eleanor with the solemn pride of a child who had personally arranged the universe. When Reverend Cole asked who gave the bride, Eleanor answered for herself. "I do." No one laughed. Wade's vows were brief. Eleanor's were steady. When he took her hand, he did so gently, palm open, waiting. She placed hers in his. Afterward, the town gathered behind Hawthorne Ironworks, where long boards had been set on barrels for supper. There was stew, beans, bread, pickled onions, coffee, apple pudding, and one crooked cake Ruth had defended from flies with terrifying devotion. Mrs. Pritchard brought napkins and did not say a word about the iron ring. Sheriff Pike made a toast so awkward, his wife took the cup from him halfway through and finished it better. Wade ate at the table because Eleanor put a plate before him and gave him a look that said marriage did not excuse foolishness. He ate every bite. At sunset, when the guests had gone and Lydia slept in her room with cake crumbs on her sleeve, Eleanor stood in the kitchen corner, washing the last cup. Wade came up beside her and took the towel. "I can do that," she said. "I know." He dried the cup and set it on the shelf. Outside, The forge gave off the day's last heat. The repaired fence behind the yard stood straight. A pot of basil leaned toward the window. The curtains moved gently in the cold draft. On the table, the bread loaf sat beneath a cloth, waiting for morning. Wade looked at it. "Have you eaten?" Eleanor smiled. "Not yet." He pulled out her chair. She sat, and he sat across from her, and together they shared bread in the lamplight, while the town settled around them, and the Arizona stars came out one by one. Years later, folks in Cedar Flats would say the blacksmith shop had the warmest table in the territory. A hungry child could find soup there. A widow could find coffee. A traveler down on luck could find bread wrapped in cloth before pride knew how to refuse it. And if anyone asked Eleanor Hawthorne when she first knew love had come for her, she would not speak of a kiss or a wedding or a ring. She would remember mud on a wedding hem, beans on a tin plate, a quiet man who stayed when staying cost him something, and the question that made a home before either of them had the courage to name it.